You're listening to the Agent and the Fan podcast with sports agent Chris Leible and fan Lou Columna.
What's up, everybody? I'm Chris Leible. This is my partner, Lou Columna. This is the Agent and the Fan podcast. Welcome, everybody. What's going on, Lou? How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I am doing great. I'm very excited for our show today. We have a special guest coming on shortly, Jim Salisbury. Jim is a longtime sports writer and an old friend, very good guy and a knowledgeable baseball man. So I want to talk to him about some different things. But I want to get started before he joins us. Today's opening day, so it's crazy. It's already here.
Opening day ish.
Well, it is opening day. The first MLB regular season game is played today, early this morning in our time zone. But obviously, it was in Korea. Prime time over in Korea, which is really exciting. It's a great thing for Major League Baseball. Obviously, with the influx of players coming from all over the world, to be able to expand the game is great. For the game, and it's exciting to see it. I got a chance to watch some of it this morning. I think you did as well, right, Lou?
I did. It's pretty cool, just seeing like the fan interaction there. Although I think I saw Ohtani's wife like 1 billion times, but it's pretty cool just to kind of see, how the fans react to baseball. Obviously, we know it's a little different in terms of the reaction and the fan, excitement, but it was pretty cool. I liked it.
Yeah, no, it was great. And, I've worked and dealt with people in Asia for a long time, in Korea. The fans are really crazy about the game, and it's such a it's such an exciting thing to see the fans. And like you said, it's a different type of crowd than maybe it would be if the game was played in Los Angeles or San Diego with the Dodgers and Padres. But it's just they're crazy about baseball, so it's to expand it and have major league games there. So exciting and fun. So that was great to see, and the game was actually an interesting game. So it was for me, it was interesting to see and fun to watch. But a very interesting turning point of the game, which was the ground ball by Gavin Lux went through the glove of Jay Cronenworth, and that ended up being the winning run for the Dodgers. Of all the money they spend and all the players they have, that's how they win the game, which is of course, that's baseball moment, right?
This is the start of the season. Shohei Ohtani is going to have 4,000 hits by the end of the year. There'll be 600 home runs by one player. So, but all jokes aside, I'm looking forward, and we'll talk about this next week for the predictions, the upcoming, baseball predictions. But this is my, of all the major sports, to me, opening day, that they have that on lock. There's something special about opening day.
I agree. And again, I think it goes, at least for me, it goes back with my dad, and it was just a special thing. He would take us out of school, and I would go to the opening day at Chase Stadium when I was a kid with my brother and my mom and dad. And it was always, a big thing. So opening day is always amazing. And like you said, it's kind of a weird one for us, a little unusual. Maybe I shouldn't say weird, but unusual that it's opening in Korea at 6 a.m. in New York time where I am. But nonetheless, it's opening day, and there's just something very special, like you said, about opening day. So it's exciting. But I'm glad you also made a good point. We are going to have our prediction show next week, so that's going to be very fun. And I'm looking forward to come hear what you have to say, and we'll have a special guest that week as well.
Yeah, I was just going to say that it's going to be interesting to see. I'm not going to tell you mine. You don't tell me yours, and I want to see how we match up, because it'll be
100%. Yeah, we're not gonna. We won't discuss that off the air. But before Jim joins us, because I know he's standing by, I do want to just talk. Something we've talked about for a long time. I feel like it's been going on forever. Blake Snell, he finally signed. He signed a 2-year deal with the Giants. Very interesting in a lot of different ways. But what are your initial thoughts on that?
My initial thoughts are, listen, I'll say this. Scott Boras next winter is going to have a monster winter with all the free agents he has. So this is an anomaly, what happened to him with his clients this year. But I think that goes to owners are getting a little smarter and not wanting to overpay for players who they don't feel, for whatever reason, is worth what Scott was asking for. And that's a fact. It's been proven so.
It's interesting. I mean, is the question...
There were named free agents, but it wasn't a lockdown stud who there was no.
Well, that's the thing. I think that's the thing, and that's the big question. Is it the owners just getting smarter, or is it just maybe not the right guys in the right market this year? I think it's probably the second more than anything else. But
I differ on that. I think the owners are getting smarter.
They might be. I mean, look,
who you give contracts out to.
They might be, but. Blake Snell, for as great of a pitcher as he's been, and a two-time Cy Young Award winner, which is very special, as you know, there's so many flaws in what he's doing, and I do believe that's what cost him the what everybody initially thought he was going to get. So, and because generally, when you're thinking of a number one starter Cy Young type pitcher, you're thinking about a guy who's going to go deep into the game, and that's never been his thing. So, we will see, because it'll be very interesting, especially if he does have a good year in San Francisco and he opts out. Will he get? And will he get what? Will he get closer to what people were predicting at the beginning of free agency? So, I think that's all something we'll see. But I think right now, it's a good time to bring in Jim Salisbury and have him join us. Jim is, I'm looking forward to seeing him. I haven't seen him in a while.
Hey, guys.
Jim, there you are. How you doing?
I'm doing well, Chris. Nice to see you. Nice to meet you, Lou.
Hey, nice to meet you, Jim.
Great to see you, too. So everybody, just so everybody knows, Jim's a guy I've known a long time. He's very good at what he does. You were of course in New York at the Post, and you covered the Yankees. But I think you're probably more well known for your coverage of the Phillies at the Inquirer in Philadelphia, of course, and at NBC in Philadelphia.
Yeah, no question. Philadelphia's it's become home, and I covered the Phillies for 28 years.
Wow!
And I kind of stepped aside in the last year or so, reframing things a little bit, trying to figure out the next chapter of my life. But that one constant is, I'm still very much interested in following baseball, and I love the people in the game, and that goes back guys like you, Chris. I've known Chris since he worked for the Mets back in the Shea Stadium days, and then in your time as an agent, we always had really positive dealings. So it's really great to be with you.
No, I'm so happy you could join us today. Obviously, we were talking about opening day, and I think you were listening in and talking about, what we normally talk about is a lot of the contract things and kind of the inside of the game. But I think the one thing, and I want to talk about different things with you, but the one thing I did want to talk about, and we discussed it a little bit, but I want to say for the air is the relationship between, like you just touched on, between the agent and the reporters. Yeah,
and I hope we can talk about opening day, because it is a really special day as well. Just to get on an immediate tangent, I remember in elementary school, I grew up in New England, and I remember in elementary school, my teacher. These were the days before you had like big audio visual departments. You had one TV in the entire elementary school, and it was on this big rolling rack.
Yeah.
And I can still remember him saying, it's opening day. Go down and get the TV at the library. And I wheeled it down to our fourth grade class, and we watched the Red Sox on opening day. And my other favorite opening day story was I covered Terry Francona for a long time in Philadelphia, and he told me once that his mother always let him cut school on opening day because opening day was special. So I just love that anecdote. But I apologize for that immediate tangent here.
No. But before you go to the other thing, and that's what the show's about, so it's okay. But it's funny you say that, because so opening for me as a kid, Same thing. I mentioned to Lou, like I got out of school. My dad was like, no, it's special. We're going to take the kids out of school. And I would have what I would always say is I would tell my parents, write the note and tell them I have to go see the doctor. And because Dwight Gooden would pitch opening day for the Mets, and I wasn't, it wasn't a lie. I was going to see the doctor. It just wasn't, the doctor they were probably thinking about.
Opening day it's just special. And I still, I covered so many of them. I remember covering, I spent a year at the New York Post in 1996, a really special year. And I remember the Yankees home opener that year.
I was there.
96?
96.
What was snow? The snow. And I remember the snow. It was like a snow globe. Somebody shook up a snow globe. They're playing the Royals, and there's snow, and Paul O'Neill's looking around. So I can remember so many great opening days. Some of them at Shea Stadium with the Phillies. And I remember another great opening day. This was, it's just coming back to me now. And I remember I was at the Philadelphia Inquirer, and I remember writing about this. The Braves were in town, and Chipper Jones was playing third base. And it was at the Vet, which you could put 68,000 people in, a huge stadium. And way up in the upper deck, the 700 level of left field, there was a fight between two rival schools, the kids from St. Joe's Prep and the kids from Monsignor Bonner. There was a big fight.
Yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt. You mean there was a fight with Philly fans?
These were teenagers in the 700 level, two rival high schools, and they're throwing bodies across seats. But what I'll never forget about it is Chipper Jones. I thought he was going to get a herniated disc in his neck from looking at the fight. He couldn't take his eyes off it. He was craning his neck, turning around. And I think the following spring, I brought it up to him, and he just reveled in remembering that and talking about it. And that's a great opening game, probably for the wrong reasons. But, it's like a blank slate in front of us. Can't wait to see what happens on opening day this year.
Jim, do you remember? This is when I was with the Mets, and you were with covering the Phillies at the time. Do you remember? I think it was '98 when Alberto Castillo hit. It was like a 15-inning game, and the Mets won 1-0.
Yes,
it was 72 degrees out. It was like one of the nicest opening day weather-wise I've ever. I think probably the nicest I've ever seen.
I think Ricky
Batalico was the pitcher. Yeah,
was the pitcher. And he was in a real good mood after that game, as you might imagine. But yeah, I remember that one. I remember so many great games at Shea Stadium. I actually I'm the guy who used to love Shea Stadium. I remember going there as a kid, and growing up in New England, I didn't see a lot of National League ball, but we drove down to Shea Stadium one day and saw the Cardinals play the Mets, and George Hendrick, of all people, Silent George, during batting practice, gave my brother a ball, and down the left field or the right field line. It was down the right field line. He gave my brother a ball. So we found our way over to the on deck circle, and my brother yells, "Hey, George, you just gave me this ball. Any chance you'd autograph it?" George says to him, "Hey, you're not supposed to tell anybody I gave away the ball." So, but I remember the slow elevator. Chris, you remember the slow elevator at Shea Stadium?
I joke around. I say they moved it to Citi Field. It's there at Citi Field still now.
Yeah, it was, and I remember the police officer who used to sit outside the press box. We have a great writer down here named Frank Fitzpatrick, a mentor of mine, a friend of mine, and they had the old timey policeman at the guarding the press box.
Yep.
I don't know what he was going to guard, but Frank used to call him Officer Tootie, if you remember Car 54, watching that on reruns. So, but. One of my great memories of Shea Stadium was that Endy Chavez catch on Scott Rowland. I'm going off way on a tangent here.
But it's funny you say that, because I have a very funny story about that with the elevator involving that catch and Endy. And I'm going to say it right now. And Lou actually knows Endy very well too. And Endy was my client, as I think you know. I represented Endy, and I was at the game, and Endy was going away. Whenever the season ended, he was out and he was going to Venezuela. So if they lost that day, he was on the first plane to Venezuela the next day. And if they won, obviously they were going to the World Series. Andy makes but Andy had asked me if he wanted to get a medallion made up, a necklace. I had it made for him. I had it in my pocket, and I just didn't know if they, I didn't know what, this might be the last time I see him. I don't know when I was going to see him again. So I said, I'll bring it with me. I'll have it ready for Game 7. Had the thing in my pocket. Of course, he makes the catch. They lose the game. I'm calling him after the game, and I said, Andy, I'm here. I'm in the Diamond Club lobby, right where the elevator was. And if you remember at the end, not the beginning, probably when you first started covering, but by the end, they had a little TV there. So while you were waiting for the elevator to take forever. Mm-hmm. So I'm waiting there, and they keep showing the catch over and over again. And Andy goes, I go, Andy, you want me to come to the tunnel? He's like, no, I'll come to you. He comes out, he's wearing sweatpants and a t-shirt, and he's standing under the TV, and there's people pouring off the elevator. There's 55,000 people at the stadium pointing at the thing. Andy's standing under it, talking to me. Not one person stopped to recognize them. Wow. Everybody was walking right by them. They were like, oh my God, how did you catch that? And Andy's just standing there, and we're just looking, and we're just smiling. No one says a word. Not one person was like, oh my God, it's Andy. And he's, if you ever saw Andy off the field.
He's not exactly an imposing figure.
Really, yeah, right. He's very unassuming looking, you know him. But I mean, so very, very funny. And that was right at that elevator. So that was weird. But yeah.
What a catch, though. I remember his elbow being above the wall. What a catch.
Yep. No, and it's crazy. Another crazy thing is, I think it was either earlier in the year or the year before. I don't remember when he joined the Mets, but he made a very similar catch off Scott Rowland in left field at Chase Stadium during a regular season game, like a game in like June or whatever. Very similar to that. Crazy, really weird. But anyway, that was that. But no, I think like you said, you saw a lot of kind of incarnations of that Mets and Phillies rivalry starting at Chase Stadium, and obviously. I think both teams had their upper hand years where they had the upper hand or whatever. And it got a little rough, I think, in the mid 2000s with some of those teams.
Yeah. I actually wrote a story back when I was at the Philadelphia Inquirer. I did a bunch of research about the Mets Phillies rivalry, and my phone's ringing. Let me get rid of that. I wrote a story about the Mets Phillies rivalry, and I was amazed, to have a real rivalry, you got to be good at the same time. You got to be banging heads,
right.
And they're very seldom were they good at the same time.
Yeah,
right. But when they are, it's an awful lot of fun. I mean, the Mets fans travel, as you know. I mean, they would take over Veterans Stadium.
Yeah,
I used to call it Shea Stadium on the Delaware because they would just come in and take it over. Same thing for Citizens Bank Park. But it's when the Phillies are good. The Phillies fans shout them right down because they're packing that place. But
right,
I mean, to me, the great year in that rivalry was 2007.
Yep,
and it started. It started about 2 weeks, probably 2 weeks before spring training, maybe 3 weeks before spring training. The Phillies have their winter caravan, the publicity caravan. Players come in town and whatnot. And it was at Citizens Bank Park by this time. And Jimmy Rollins, now the Phillies, mind you, hadn't been to the playoffs in 14 years. And Jimmy Rollins says during the publicity caravan that we're the team to beat in the NL East. I mean, like I said, they hadn't been to the playoffs for 14 years. It was a bold statement. I know it raised eyebrows in the front office. They're like, okay, we think we're getting better. We think we're a pretty good club. But you just put a target on our back, and lo and behold, I mean, Jimmy Rollins, he wore that comment every day of 2007.
Yep.
And he backed it up right till the last game when the Phillies overtook. They came back they were down 7.5 with 17 to play, right?
Yep.
And they came back over the final 17 days to beat the Mets on the last day of the season. And during that game in Philadelphia, the clinching game, Jimmy Rollins hit his 20th triple of the season. He had 30 home runs, 20 triples, 38 doubles, like 95 RBIs. He hit 275. He won a Gold Glove. He led the league in runs with like 140 runs. To me, he wore that. That was Jimmy. He was he was going to back it out. He was not a physically imposing guy, but a tough kid. And, kind of a bigger they come, the harder they fall type of guy. And he backed it up every day. I remember that season agonizing over my MVP ballot with Matt Holliday and David Wright. I think Prince Fielder, Chase Sutton. They were just guys that had great seasons.
Yeah.
But that intangible quality of Jimmy backing it up every day and wearing that comment, because every time he went to Shea Stadium that year, he had a bullseye on his back. They wore him out. The fans wore him out. And he would have big game against big game against the Mets. And that was really, I think, the defining year in that rivalry. There's been other good years, but so seldom when they're good together. And it's really great when they are good together because they're so close and the fans travel so well.
No, you're right. And it's true because, obviously you can go back to Steve Carlton and Tom Seaver, which, way back in the day. And then, like you said, the Phillies were such a great team in those late years in the 70s. And then in the 80s, the Mets became the team. And then, like you said, it was kind of, you're good, we're good, you're good, we're good. So it was, it was a great run. But some guys like Jimmy Rollins, some guys just can motivate themselves, or that stuff motivates them, and some guys don't. But you're right, and I think that also became a very personal series. The teams really didn't like each other. I remember Jose Reyes, my client, also telling me like, those guys I thought they were my friends, but they're not my friends anymore. He told me, he was like, my only friend on that team is Pedro Feliz. Other than the rest of them, nope, I don't like any of them anymore. I don't
Pedro Feliz, he was the third baseman on the 08 World Championship team. Great defender.
Yep.
He had a really big hit in that World Series. Really an underrated, outstanding player on that 08 team, Pedro Feliz. Dusty Baker used to call him El Nino.
So, Jim, quick question. As a writer, how do you cultivate that relationship? You were talking about Jimmy Rollins. How do you cultivate a relationship with a player where he feels comfortable enough to share something with you or feels at ease with you? And conversely, have you had a guy who was just difficult? I mean,
there's a lot of guys. It's like any other walk of life. There's people you mesh with, there's people you don't. So, but the way you cultivate a relationship is really easy. You just be yourself. If you're not yourself, people see right through it, and you're not going to mesh with anybody. But for baseball writer, I think a lot of players have a code. I remember covering Joe Torre, and he only had two rules for his players.
Don't be late.
Don't show up on time and work hard. And I think in the back of his mind, he had the same code for the writers. He knew the guys that were there on time and the guys that were not. And I think a lot of players are like that. They can tell if you're dedicated and passionate and respect the game. If you don't respect the game, that's their profession, their livelihood. How you expect them to respect you? So just be yourself and respect what they do, respect the game. And, I've always found that asking, guys will respect you if you ask good, hard, tough questions, as long as they're fair. So, and there's a real sense of fairness in a major league clubhouse. And, they all have good BS detectors. If they think you're full of it, you're not going to build a relationship with them. But you can't force it. It takes time, and just like I said, be yourself and be fair. Don't be cheap. I think that's really important.
Yeah, I was just going to say that because obviously, the New York media, the Boston media, the Philly media, I feel, gets a bad rap. You have to be, you may like Jimmy Rollins, you may like Chase Utley, but if you got to be critical for whatever reason, they have to respect that.
Yeah.
And, obviously, I'm just naming these two guys, but as a whole, you got players who don't care, who are just like, he's attacking me and it's tough. I mean, you have a job to do and you can't, this guy goes 0 for 5 and commits 3 errors. You can't say he had a great game.
Well, there's I think there's a difference between ripping on somebody and being cheap and good, honest, fair critique. And I think most professionals understand, good, hard, honest, fair critique. Scott Rowland he's a Hall of Famer now. I remember one night at the Vet, he struck out 5 times in a game, 5 times. And, you talk about accountability and getting it. Scotty was accountable and he got it. He was in a back room and there was a handful of writers after that game. And he came walking out. I remember he had a Coke in his hand or something. And he comes over to the writers and said, I figured you might want to talk to me tonight. So, it helps when guys kind of get it and don't take things personally and understand the difference between being ripped on and being critiqued. And obviously a guy like Jimmy Rollins got it. I mean, excuse me, there were times when, I think Jimmy was late a couple times. It was once in Shea Stadium. I think he got stuck in traffic or something. And, I think Charlie Manuel reprimanded him and benched him. And Jimmy, waves you right over and raises his hand and kind of wears it like a man. So, but the best way to, I think, build those relationships is be around, care about the game, respect the game, and just be yourself. Don't be.
That's awesome.
Don't be phony.
Yeah.
Jim, do you remember when Bobby Abreu got benched because he showed up late to a game at Shea Stadium?
I remember when Jimmy got benched in Shea Stadium. I don't remember when Bobby. I'm sure if I racked my brain,
it's funny. I was having lunch with him, and Bobby's
you made him late.
Back. What's that?
You made him late.
No, it was the opposite. I'm like, we're having lunch, and I was like, Bobby, what time you got to go to the stadium? Nah, we're good. We're good. We're good. So I remember back then, it's got to be like 2000. And I'm like, all right. And then we had a long lunch, and he went to the stadium, and I went back to my office. And then I back then I always drove, but back in, I think, 1 year for the 2000 season, I actually was taking the train to my house, back and forth every day instead of taking public transportation. And I took it, and I got off the train, and I got in my car, and I turned the game. It had just, they were announcing the lineups, and like, Bobby Abreu is sitting this one out tonight. And I was like, no. And he was benched. He was benched.
I had a lot of great memories watching Bobby. He was a really gifted player, especially on the offensive side. That beautiful stroke. He always reminded me of in his setup at the plate, and he was reminded me a little bit of Robbie Alomar in his setup at the plate.
They're probably,
he was a line drive machine and a really, really good Philly for a long time. He just got stuck on he got stuck when on bad teams when the franchise was kind of caught. Between a rock and a hard place. They were in Veterans Stadium, trying to get out of Veterans Stadium, trying to get a new stadium, trying to find a place to put the stadium, trying to find a way to get financing. So, he was caught in that, in the middle of all that. So he ended up on some bad teams and missed out on their great run, as did Scott Rowland, for other reasons. But, it's almost like, again, I'm getting on a tangent, but the ballpark in Philadelphia, a beautiful place. You've been to it. It's kind of created a tale of two baseball cities. Getting out of the Vet and going into that place really changed the entire.
By the way, you mentioned you love Shea. I love the Vet. I don't know why I loved it, but I just loved it. I thought it was a great place. I always liked to go there. I don't know. I know the field wasn't great. The surface or whatever was poor and all that stuff, but I don't know. I just like that stadium. I love Citizens Bank. It's one of my favorites. But I did like the Vet. I don't know why. I don't know.
Yeah, it was a lot of great memories there, man. And
for sure.
I covered a lot of games in the Vet. I remember the press box was mid-level of the stadium, and it was prime foul ball territory, and they would come flying back there. The worst guy ever was Mariano Duncan. He could peel off these balls, and they would come up there at 110 miles an hour, and they'd leave dents in the back wall, and you get your head down typing, and then one's going by your head. But yeah, a lot of great times at the Vet. I covered the last baseball game at the Vet, and I covered the last football game at the Vet.
Is that right?
When that Tampa Bay Buccaneers beat the Eagles, and the famous Jurevicius game. And I was helping out on the football coverage because it was such a big story, and I'll never forget. It was really cold that day, and I'll never forget hearing those the feet kind of sloughing against the really cold concrete on the ramps.
Yeah.
A building with 70,000 people was so quiet. It was pretty amazing.
That's wild. Going back to Bobby, I thought, was a good, very good Philly, one of the better ones they probably had. If you look at his career and everything. Mm-hmm. But it was funny. I remember going to a game, and Bobby and I did all the stuff for him. I always had his equipment, all that stuff. But Bobby, he had his clean helmet, white batting gloves, white shoe. Everything was clean, neat. And I remember he was playing the game, and I think they were down. I don't know what happened. I was sitting right behind the dugout, and they were maybe down like 8-3 in like the third inning. Bobby was 2 for 2, and whatever happened, whoever was pitching, it imploded and gave a bunch of runs. It was 8-3, and Bobby was 2 for 2. He had an RBI, a couple of runs scored, and he's in the on deck, and the fans were getting angry. And he's standing there, and he's in their on deck circle. Then he's ready to start. Jim Tomei and him are in the on deck circle. And Jim Tomei's there. He's got pine tar in his helmet, dirty all over his jersey, and Bobby's wearing all. And some guy starts screaming at Bobby, you get your uniform dirty one time. And he's screaming at Bobby, going like, the guy's 2 for 2. What are you blaming? He didn't give up 8 runs in 3, But I think that was
Bobby made it. He was one of those guys who could make it look easy, a little bit like Mike Schmidt. They could make it look easy, and sometimes I think people appreciate the guy who makes it look hard more, the guy who grinds, Larry Boa throwing across the diamond with all his might, where Schmidt would flip the ball at 96 miles an hour. So
exactly.
But Bobby, he came to the Phillies in a great trade. Ed Wade engineered that trade.
Yep.
With Tampa Bay. Yeah, when they were coming in the league for expansion. And so Ed was the assistant GM under Lee Thomas in those years. And, the Phillies in spring training, Ed had a couple clubs that even as the assistant GM, he would scout, regular daily coverage. So one of his teams was the Astros. They were over in Kissimmee.
Yep.
And he watched Bobby Abreu for a couple springs and really liked him and knew he was kind of blocked in Houston. And he was the guy who really championed that trade. Lee Thomas ended up making the trade, but Ed Wade was an important guy in that trade. And Ed is an important, underrated guy in Phillies history because he was one of the architects of the 08, of the 07 through 11, 5 division titles, and the World Series in 08. Ed, brought a lot of those guys into the organization and put together a lot of the foundation of that team. I've always thought it was really classy of Pat Gillick, who ended up being the GM that got him over the hump. Pat always gave Ed, tip of the hat for the good work he did. So, Bobby wasn't around for the World Series. Ed wasn't around for the World Series, but two important guys in the kind of the growth of that franchise as it went from the old stadium to the new stadium. I think the trade of Bobby to the Yankees was also influential because it kind of opened up that clubhouse a little bit for some young guys, allowed Victorino to play more. But Bobby, and he's on their Wall of Fame. He's an important guy in Phillies history.
Yeah, I was there with him when he got inducted, and Ed, you're right. Ed Wade, I mean, just a great guy, and really Ed always. That was always the big feather in his hat, and I think he was proud of that. That was, that was such a lopsided trade. Kevin Stocker did nothing for the Rays when they acquired him in the expansion draft. They acquired Bobby in the expansion draft, and that's how the trade ended up working out. But you're right, Ed Wade always was very proud of that, and rightly so. That was, like you said, that was a huge deal for them. So
that was a great time for the Phillies. I think that, Jim, to your point, that era was like, Shane Victorino coming up because of that.
Yeah.
Ryan Howard, Chase Utley, Jimmy Rollins. Cole Hamels. That team was just stacked.
So, in Ryan Howard, Chase Utley, and Jimmy Rollins, you have the best first baseman, second baseman, and shortstop in franchise history. If you want to daydream a little bit, had things gone differently, you could have Scott Rowland at third base as a veteran player. Wow. But you mentioned Cole Hamels, 24 years old, just absolutely putting that team on his back in October of 2008. They don't win the World Series without him. He was absolutely amazing that whole month. I remember him going into Dodger Stadium and just quieting that place. So, a great team, Charlie Manuel. I mean, when you're around baseball a long time, you've seen, when guys play for a guy and when guys don't.
Charlie, and I think
they played for Charlie.
But Charlie was just an old school baseball guy who. And it's a shame because you're not seeing as many people like Charlie anymore in the game, and I'm not a fan of that, because I think there should always be a place for the Charlie Manuels of the world, and there's not that many of them, but he's a special individual. But you're 100% right; he was just the right guy for that team. They busted
it. They busted it for him.
No question.
I mean, Chase Utley's loyalty to Charlie Manuel and still is, Ryan Howard. Jimmy, they loved this guy. They didn't want to let him down. They respected him so much.
Yep. Yeah.
He was, a motivator, a confidence builder, a people guy who could keep a group of men together and kind of steer it through rough patches, smooth sailing patches. He wasn't just good when things were going good. When things were going bad, he could be that kind of, in private, reassuring guy to rework a player's confidence. And he was a great fit on that team. And, he was a guy who was like, people in the community, much like Joe Torre in '96, they didn't want him in New York. Well, they didn't want Charlie in Philadelphia when he got the job. Again, Ed Wade hired him. They scoffed at that hire, and now he is as beloved as any sports figure in this community.
Yeah.
How's he doing physically? I know he was having some problems.
Yeah, doing really well, thank goodness.
Good.
He's been at spring training.
Oh, good.
In his domain, the batting cage, around the batting cage, talking hitting, teaching hitting, giving hitting advice. He's really kind of a savant when it comes to hitting. And he can kind of pick apart a swing, make just this one little adjustment that gets a guy going, and all of a sudden confidence blooms and you got something. That's Charlie Manuel. He's a real gem of a man and a human being.
Yeah.
Awesome. So Jim, I have one last question for you before we let you go. we discussed, the relationship between you and the player. Talking to this guy here, what's the relationship between an agent yourself?
So I've always liked and enjoyed my dealings with agents. Again, it's like any other person-to-person relationship. Everybody's different. Some are gregarious and loaded with personality. Some are like wrapped in barbed wire. They don't want you to come near them. They don't.
Who was Chris, by the way?
If everybody was as great as Chris, Chris would always return your calls. He would help you to the point where he could help you. He's representing his player. There's certain things that need to be kept in-house with the player, and he would do that, and his partners would do that. I kind of judged an agent I just wanted to be treated fairly. I mean, I think there are probably guys out there who have better relationships with certain agents, and I think it spills over into their coverage. You just want to be treated fairly. You'd like a return phone call, and have your questions answered to the point where it's not detrimental to their client. And I've had so many good relationships with agents over the years. So many smart guys that you learn the game from, and they in turn just want the same thing. They want their clients and they want themselves to be treated fairly. So I always enjoyed my time talking to agents, and I do think it's also important. I'll say this. Sometimes I think we deal with agents a lot in the off season during free agent seasons, but I think the best dealings you can have are kind of during the season. Hey, call up a guy and say, I just wanted to chat with you kind of on background. So-and-so seems out of sorts. Your player is everything all right there? So-and-so's having a great run in AAA. Is there any, possibility that he gets moved or finds a greener pasture? I think you can build those relationships during the season. Everything doesn't have to focus around free agency and is my team in on your guy. So it's like any other relationship. Be yourself, respect the game, respect what they do, and hopefully you get that respect back. And I know, I think Chris and I always had that. Yeah,
no question. I think I always, obviously you mentioned it to start with. I started actually in scouting in minor leagues with the Mets, but where I really started taking off was when I went into media relations and worked with Jay Horowitz. And when I've always enjoyed working with the media and really the beat writers are always, as much as, I enjoy working with the TV guy or whatever it was, but, and I know you've done both, but, I always enjoyed working with the beat writers, because you guys as a beat writer are almost as, ingrained in the team as you're almost part of the team, because you're going to live and die with each game, even though you're not taking sides as a reporter. You're still, if the Phillies are 60 and 90 going into the end of the season, it's kind of a different atmosphere than when they're, battling the Mets down, the final game of the season.
No question.
It's, so I think you guys always have your finger on the pulse of things, sometimes even more than some people in the front office. And it's always, to me, it's always informative. It's always good to gain knowledge, gain outside perspective, whether you're with the team or an agent, you're getting something, you're always getting something back. But my background and my, where I learned and made my bones in the business was in media relations, trying to help the media and trying to, whatever I could do to help them, like you said, within reason. And that's why I always appreciate someone like yourself, Jim, who understands, like, I'm still doing my job. My main job is to make sure my client's happy, my client's good, my client's got what he needs to get where he wants to go and where we want him to go as an agent. But if I can help you in any way or help you with your job, it's only going to help grow the team, grow the player, grow the game on the bigger picture, and make things better. Because sometimes that interpersonal relationship is what, changes what somebody sees in the player, instead of going, oh, well, there's Bobby Abreu who has this, that, and the other thing, or he has clean uniform, but he has Abreu's Amigos, which is his charity arm, and he was doing all these different things and had kids, underprivileged kids at games all the time, and all these different things we were doing with them. So,
yeah, you mentioned, like, you're around the team every day. You're literally embedded with the team.
You're part of the team.
You get to know guys as people, and that's really, really rewarding. You had Freddie Galvis, right?
Yeah.
Just a beautiful kid. I know his whole story. When they had him, they first saw him when he was like 14. Sal Agustinelli saw him when he was 14 and loved him, and how they, kind of nurtured the relationship. And and then they made an offer to him and they tried to hide him. And then the Yankees in Tampa Bay got involved and they had to up their offer. But that was all as an amateur before he signed. Before he was even 16. And you get to know these stories by being embedded and talking to Freddie, talking to Sal. Learning that background about players and what makes them tick only helps you, I think, cover the team. And I always loved knowing kind of a player's background. What's he like as a person? Because I think it helped me cover him. Like Kyle Schwarber, he's a great leader. This guy is like, and I wasn't around the team last year, but I saw him, I've seen his career, and I saw him in 2022 around the Phillies every day. And, his leadership is special, the way guys gravitate toward him in the clubhouse, sitting around talking, reviewing a game. I think he really had a really great benefit in helping bring along a kid like Alec Boehm, but he's a kind of a pure, no pretense. I talked about being yourself. He's totally himself, and he's a good leader. And you learn, well, his dad was a cop, like a chief of police, and Kyle used to love to go to the precinct and hang out with the guys. And you can almost see that being like a clubhouse. And his mother was like a healthcare professional, nurse, I think, helping people. You can almost see those two personalities in a guy like Kyle Schwarber. So I think that's one of the rewarding parts about when you're when you're embedded with a team. You learn to know what makes a guy tick. Like, what makes Jimmy Rollins tick. Everybody thought he was too small. And he was going to dig in and prove everybody wrong. Even the scout, a guy named Bob Poole, who first watched Jimmy in Alameda, California, lied on his report and put him down as 5'9", because he knew if he turned him in at 5'6.5", none of the big dog scouts were going to come out and see him. So Jimmy's always had that chip on his shoulder. He's going to prove guys wrong.
But Jim,
and you get to know that and appreciate that when you're around the team every day.
But I think that's what makes someone like yourself, who's been able to have such a great career as a beat reporter, in that you, and I know you've done other things, but as a beat reporter, because you understand that and you've taken the time to learn that, and that's only going to make you better as a reporter. And it's going to make the play, improve the players' standing and show, the fans, and you're giving the perspective on to the fans. So, and that's one thing as an agent, I always I've always done and will always do, is to make sure that the players understand that if you work with these guys, the reporters, and I know it's not something, and we talked about it earlier in the show, but you work with them, they will have your back and they'll take care of you, and you work together. And I think I've proven that over and over again with my clients. Now, not everybody listens. Okay, not everybody carries out what I'm asking them to do, but the guys like a Freddie Galvis, who I've sat down and had discussions with on top of discussions of, listen, and Freddie's a great kid. Freddie, you meet him, he's from a good place. He comes from a good family. He goes from, all those things. Not everybody's, obviously not everybody comes from a good place. So that's why you get these different things, or chips on shoulder, whatever it is. Freddie didn't have a chip on his shoulder, but type of guy, maybe in a way, but not like that. But what I'm saying is, like, a Freddie Galvis, the type of guy, he built a relationship with the media. And even not even in his own, first language, but he was able to build a relationship, because, that's the one thing that I've always talked to my clients. And I learned it, when I was with the Mets, and I used to do a video every year for the team of do's and don'ts, how to respond, be there when you strike out 5 times, like you mentioned, Scott Rowland did. Make sure you are available and talk to them. Don't disappear, because then and I've heard the million stories, and all the reporters, and talking to guys like, RIP Marty Noble or someone like that, telling me, he didn't want to talk to me when he made the losing error, but when we had a winning homer, I wouldn't go near him. I wouldn't talk to him, or when he walked off the game. So, like, you always want to have that, and just be there for the media, because you guys have a job to do too. So you're respecting them, they respect you, right? You're respecting them, but to be there, good and bad. And at the end of the day, those are the guys that get respect, and that's the guys who will have the nice things written about them, and you won't have those. George Hendricks was a great guy. You mentioned him earlier, but he just didn't like reporters, and it definitely hurt his standing in the game a little bit. Now, again, maybe he doesn't care. I don't know, George, but but I do honestly believe that if you guys, if a player does the right thing by you guys do the right thing by them, and it works that way. Now, there's some dirtbags in any form of life, so obviously that's a whole nother discussion. But
well, I would hope most reporters cover a player fairly, whether he treats them kindly or not. And I hope I have over the years.
No, you have. Others haven't.
I've spoken to a lot of prospects over the years about the reporter-player relationship. And one thing I always tell them is, in addition to, we're all humans and we're all people. We respect the game. And I tell them, we don't really create the image. We, convey the image, how you want to be portrayed, if you're, like I covered Roy Halladay, he was serious. He was like a scientist in his bullpen sessions. I didn't create that image. He created that image of serious as a surgeon, he created it, but I conveyed it by observing him and speaking with him and being treated fairly by him. So we don't create the image, or we don't create the narrative, but we convey it. So if you want to be a D-bag, if you act like a D-bag, these fans are smart. They're going to read right through it, and they're going to see what you are. Yep.
No question.
Whether it's on camera or in writing. If you're a clown, they're going to see it, No
question about it.
It's really, and I also tell them, be yourself, If you're not Joe, Good Time Charlie, like I'll go back to Halliday, very serious guy, wasn't really one to engage in small talk, and that's okay. He was true to himself. That's what he needed to do, true to his craft. A great man, God rest his soul, and a great pitcher. But what we knew about Roy Halladay, it's because we observed him. We observed the seriousness, the dedication, the perseverance, and everything else. And then as the media, you can convey that to the fan. So.
Yep. No, 100% true. Jim, listen, thank you so much for coming on. This was great. I'm really happy you joined us. Obviously, it's great to see you. It's been, like you said, it's been a long time, but I'm happy, and hopefully we're seeing each other more regularly soon enough. But thank you so much for joining us. We'll let you go, and we'll see you soon. Maybe we'll have you back on someday soon.
That sounds great, and it's great being with you. And I thank you, and enjoy the season, guys.
All right, thanks. You too. Take care, Jim.
Take care, Jim.
That was great, Lou. So that was good stuff. Very good. Jim's a good guy, and
great guy.
Yeah.
So Chris, we haven't done this in a while. Do you have the Miami Minute? Do you have a new one?
Yes. Miami Minute. Let's go. Ready? Here we go. Okay. So, University of Miami, it's NCAA tournament time. It didn't work out this year for us. We made the Elite Eight 2 years ago. Last year, we made the Final Four. This year, we had really high hopes. When I joined the team in the Bahamas this past November, I thought we were definitely going back to the Final Four. It didn't work out well at all. We lost 10 in a row to end the season. It was a total disaster, and it was disappointing. But it is the spring, and it's hope is springs eternal in the spring. Okay, just like we were saying about opening day. Well, guess what? Spring football has started. We have a new quarterback. I'm very excited about it. Cam Ward, what's up? Shout out to you. Love you. Can't wait to see you out there. Old number one, our guy, Cam Ward. But I do want to make a point. This football team I'm looking forward to seeing, we're still months away from getting back to, from getting to Gainesville when we have their opening game against the University of Florida. Okay. But here's the thing. So I want to talk about the University of Miami baseball team. Guys, this team lost a lot of guys last year. Well, guess what? They've replaced a lot of them, and we need to fix our bullpen a little bit, but they have won 2 series in a row against 2 of the top teams in the country, North Carolina, Virginia, back-to-back weekends. We're playing better. Big win last night against FIU. The team is playing great. We got Danny Dingers, our freshman third baseman, hitting bombs all over the field. Our first baseman, Torres, has been absolutely amazing. One of the top players in the country right now. Check his average out, his home runs, his production's been off the charts. Our pitching's gotten a little better. We got to fix our middle of our bullpen. The closer's been great. Guys, these guys are doing great. I'm hopeful now. We got a big weekend this week in Notre Dame. And hopefully we can sweep these guys up in South Bend in some cold weather and go take care of business. Go Canes baseball.
And we leave you with that.
All right. Thanks everybody for joining. We'll see you again next week. Don't forget predictions, baseball predictions for the 2024 season. Take care, everybody.
Take care, guys.